I actually want to start with one of the articles you wrote about AI adoption and build your foundation before you build your future. And one of the things you talk about is different type of foundations. So what are the right foundations that any company, local government, anybody who wants to start should at least have those things as part of their checklist?
Yeah, well, first things first, all organizations, public sector, private sector, doesn't matter. They need to start with what the organizational strategy is before they do anything else. So you have to start with the very basic of what the organization actually does and what it's trying to accomplish before you get into anything as related to AI. So I think a lot of times there's a push or a rush right away to just, hey, how do I get this AI going in my organization? Whether that's some pressure or that's just like some fear that's out in space, and all those things are, real and they exist today, right? But at the same time, ultimately, really what you want to do is you're not looking to implement AI. You're looking to fix a problem.
Correct.
So right out of the gate, it's what are the problems we as an organization are looking at, or what are the outcomes that we're trying to create as an organization. Starting there is really where it all begins, and then from there, there's a myriad of elements you can take from the foundations. So there's all the spots of again, what does the organization truly try to want to accomplish? So for example, when you are in the public sector, risk mitigation is very important. Like, how do we better serve our constituents? How do we do that in such a way that we also mitigate our risk as a county, as a state, as a city, or those other things? So putting things through that lens is probably one of the immediate foundations you want to stand on, to say that we as an organization, or we as a county, we as a city, we as a state, whatever it actually is, or a private sector organization as well, really, what is our goal and what is the outcome we're trying to create? And that truly gets you into a spot where you can, effectively look at the problems you have as an organization, and then where AI may apply. And in that application, a lot of exciting places to go. Obviously, lots of promise within the space, lots of people doing all kinds of tests, lots of people applying, large elements within that to sort of get all those things going. But ultimately, what you really get to is, how do you sort of harness what you have internally and what you want to create? Literally asking the question, what do we want? Not where we want to go, but literally, what do we want as an organization? And taking that, what do you want, into that creates an actual outcome for the organization to say, this is our desired location. Let's figure out how we're going to get there.
So I like your point. So let's say you are a city manager, or you could be a head of department. What they want to be very different, right? And what we want can also vary, different degree of complexity. From simple thing could be like, I just want to create a presentation so I don't have to create anything, versus we want something that handles, residents' incoming call through automating, voice agents. So this can vary based on the urgency or the depth of what you want versus the complexity of the implementation. So there's like a huge scale.
Yes.
So how do you determine where do you land on the scale, based on the resources or based on which department you're a part of? How do you navigate that or think through those things?
Yeah, it's a great question. Here's what I always would say. You always want to start small. So like, AI is still new for a majority of us. And even folks that say they've been using it a long time, that may even be theoretical, and they're just starting to really use it in true application today. So start small, start with something that you can define and get an easy win with. I don't just mean the stuff that's not like, I think easy win sometimes was like, oh yeah, that doesn't matter. Actually, it matters a lot, where you actually to say, hey, we applied something, we tested something, and it worked. And that drives the confidence within the organization. So if you're a city manager with these 15 priorities sitting at your desk, and you might be really tempted to go after the really complex stuff right out of the gate. I would definitely advise, if this was my client, I would definitely advise starting with, let's talk about all 15 of these, and it's important to have that list, but I would start at something that you feel like you could actually execute upon. And like, one of the key points of that, Michelle, question is like, do you have the data to even be able to do it?
Right.
So like, if you're engaged in a project, you have to understand, okay, do we have the data? If you have the data, okay, that's almost step one after the definition of the problem. Then it's saying, okay, how can we sort of automate this? And again, even if as an organization we're going to automate a process. We're going to get rid of some sort of manual element that causes our people 3 to 5 hours of time, and we can do it in a couple minutes. Even if it's anything from content generation, like a generative AI work, or maybe it's something it might be automating an invoicing process. It might be a constituent communication. There's all kinds of ideas that they could go along, and pick something manageable right out of the gate. Because I think what will happen for that city manager is they get far more confident about what they're doing. And all of a sudden, AI isn't this sort of mysterious specter, this sort of magical thing that people sort of talk about. It becomes something very practical and pragmatic that they can use today. And on that, continue to work down the list. So, they're going to have priorities that are very important to them. And I would always, when I'm in these conversations, and this is a frequent conversation point, start where you are. Start in a place that, and also feel like, okay, let's do this as a pilot. And again, you don't do these things across an entire, city. Like a city manager, they should pick a very small bit, like, hey, let's try this with 5 people that are going to do this, and we're going to automate this process. And then they figure it out. Because as you know, you can't do something automatically until you do it manually. So let's understand the manual process. Let's figure out within that process that we can actually automate or utilize an AI tool of some type, perhaps even automation, to get that done and put that into a space that we can actually, create the result that we're really looking for.
Actually, I really like the point that you just mentioned, that you can just automate something if you are not done it manually. And I think that
Yes,
is
sir.
a critical component, because then you can kind of plot out your flow chart. That let's say, like report writing, for example. I'm just picking something up here. Like as a city clerk, you have to generate a lot of reports. Like, what is your process looks like? Okay, I need to get this documentation from person A. Then I need to read the documentation. Then I need to compile to which one I need based on what my requirements are. Then I need to convert this into a PDF, or that could be a report, maybe it's a presentation, maybe somebody needs to approve it. So let's say there are like 5 steps. Then looking into, okay, I don't need to even automate all 5 of them. Can I just start with automating just 2 steps, where I just put in the data, like these PDF files? Because we had one of my friends, she's a city clerk here, deputy city clerk at Chandler. So she was telling, we were talking literally a couple of months ago, that she had to figure out, she has a lot of boards and commissions. So she had to figure out which people were part of boards and commissions. So typically they're 2-year period, that when their 2-year period was expiring, and if they were able to extend it to another one, or if they had to do certain type of training to actually get to the second term if they want to. So it's basic information, but she's like, I had like hundreds of pages of his documentations I had to go through. So something like that you think could be good one, just dump it in, it has the data, you can ask the right questions, at least that part is automated, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The premise of using AI to synthesize information, again, in a protected environment, obviously, but essentially developing a knowledge base. This is all the information that we have on this particular subject, and set that up as a project that you're going to look at, and then be able to set up where you can interact with it, summarize it, or ask questions for it in an interactive environment. It's a fantastic use case for a city or for a state, for a county, no question. And the part on the manual process, just going through and actually writing things down, as archaic as that sort of sounds, and developing the boxes and say, hey, here's the if-then statement, and this goes here, this goes there. That process is actually incredibly helpful, because then you truly understand what you're doing, versus I just do X. Okay, well, you have to build it out. And then, as you said, like, hey, listen, we're actually only going to automate the front half of this, because the back half, actually, there's no real time that goes into it. It's just checking the report or whatever it might be. So it's figuring out where that pain point is. And that's almost, one of those questions in our consulting world, is that, like, we'll go and just have like a very direct conversation with someone and say, where's the pain points, or what's the dumb stuff your people are doing that you don't want to do anymore? Because it's shocking, like, how those, and they aren't usually big things, Shaw. They're usually like sort of like just they're manual processes, like someone's working with a spreadsheet, or working with or having to like look through a tremendous amount of information and try to figure out what it actually means. That's the stuff that AI is really built for.
Actually, you just mentioned that one of the things you kind of look into is when you guys go in as a consulting, like, hey, what are the like dumb or archaic stuff that you guys are doing manually? And so what are these set of questions that you ask, or how do you explore? Because a lot of times what happens and I'm guilty of that too, that if I'm doing something, I just because you've been doing it for so long, you just think this is the process. Like, this is not an archaic way of doing it, because your brain just think this is the way to do it. So how do you like delve into, when you're having a conversation with, so let's say if I'm a city clerk, for example, like, what are your set of questions that you ask them to dive into figuring out which are those places? Because that will also help like our audience to kind of understand, hey, let me ask these questions to myself, so I can figure out, okay, this is where I'm spending time that I should not be spending time.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me go into a couple bigger items, and I'll take it into just some smaller ones. So here's some few key questions you just want to ask. Do you have clear goals? and where do those goals intersect? And where can AI intersect with? That's one. Is the data accessible? Is it accurate? Is it secure? Like those are just fundamental elements you have to touch. Are our teams equipped with the right skills?
Right.
So as the city manager or as the team, or do they have an outside consultant that's coming in and helping them? Probably even more importantly than that is does the mindset exist that AI is something we're going to use in a positive way? For all the strengths that it has, and also put it in a place where it doesn't replace all the people. It's used as a teammate. That's another very important thing. And then anytime you're doing that, we always get change management going right away. So that's communication. That's how this change is going to affect the people. Because listen, at the end of the day, regardless of how much the executive team will want the people to do A, B, and C, if the people aren't ready for it, they don't know how to do it, they can't do it.
Right.
So let me give you some more specifics. So if we get into almost like let's play the game of are you ready for AI game, which is this is a game that a lot of people are playing right now and say, how do I do this? So first off is, mapping your technology, like what do you have and what do you actually need?
Right.
And so for example, we're on Microsoft Stack and we do this, and we haven't done Copilot yet. Should we do Copilot? That's an example. Like look at that data quality. Like what is it like? And then let's start looking at the processes. And okay, let's look at the processes and figure out where you can streamline them. Take that, and then you want to actually assess the readiness. There's lots of great tools out there. We use one of our partners. We come into an organization and just basically ask a bunch of questions, and we come up with a readiness assessment for the organization. And by the way, here's a little secret sauce. Everybody's at the beginning. Okay, if you're OpenAI, you're not, but I'll be honest at the beginning. Okay, Microsoft, they're probably not. Google, they're not. But lots and lots, most of the rest of us we're at the beginning. We're figuring it out. And even when someone says AI expert, be a little bit cautious. We're all learning. Okay, and I've been in this game a long time, and I'll tell you that I still learn new things every single day. I learned new things today that I didn't know, and you did too. So anyone that's playing with the tools is learning it. And then from there, you also just want to, how do you connect the AI? After you've gone through the assessment, how do you actually connect the AI to the goals? Again, if you go through that whole structure, you're really kind of setting yourself up for success at that point. And think about it as a way to sort of unlock potential. That's kind of really how when I'm talking about AI, I do two things. I always talk about it as a verb instead of a noun. It means it's something you have to do instead of talk about.
Right.
Like there's lots of people we've talked about it a long time. Now we're at the point where people got to actually do stuff and by the way, here's the thing I will say about trying things out. It's okay not to be great at it right away, because you're not going to be. All right, you're going to learn. That's part of the learning. You have to be willing to sort of say, okay, I'm going to learn this, and I'm probably not going to be great at it right away, but you'll get great quickly. And if you spend 15 minutes a day on AI, 6 months later, all of a sudden, people are asking you questions because you're telling people what's going on. And that same sort of idea. So you take that sort of the readiness for the organization, you sort of mix in all the other sort of points we're talking about, and then you go into the path of how can we really, really, sort of help you get to where you want to go. And that's really what AI's functionality is. That and the fact that I think at one point, and I think we've even joked about this in the past, man, like there's been a lot of folks that just look at AI as a tool.
Right.
Okay. You should always put a swear jar in your desk every time you say AI is a tool. Now, don't say that. AI is a teammate.
Yeah.
AI is someone that you work with to help your life and your work go far better than without it. Let it do what it's good at, and you do what you're good at, and you work together to go accomplish bigger goals than what you're doing before.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and it's one of the things you literally reminded me that there was somebody said that it's not AI that's going to take your job. It's the person who knows how to use AI better than you is going to.
Yeah, this is where I would go with that. And by the way, I completely agree with that statement. I also think honestly it'll create far more work than it'll take away. Will it take some jobs away? Sure. It'll also create all kinds of other work that doesn't exist because we don't even know what it is right now. Mm-hmm. But really what that comes back to is this idea of AI literacy or fluency, and you'll hear this. You'll go on LinkedIn and go check out AI that, or go do a perplexity search on AI literacy, and you'll be astounded by the amount of content that there is out there. For me, it falls into three buckets. Okay, for AI literacy, the first one is how do you nail the basics? So you need to understand what AI is, what it does, and how it actually works at enough of a level that you can truly understand it. So it's not this mystical, magical thing. Next, you work on getting good at it. So you start using it. So again, AI is a verb. You put it to use, and you start actually using the tools in such a way that you understand how to use them, and you start having that aha moment where the spreadsheet that you used to work on that took you 3 hours once a week now takes you 4.5 minutes because you've automated the process with one of your AI assistant tools. And then lastly, the part that is actually, I think, just as important as all the others is how are you leading in this space? So help other people understand it. Like the example of influence and being an example is really important in this space. This is part of what you're doing. You're serving as an example for people to take a look at what this is. Even our discussion today, that'll be a public piece that people could look at, and that's an example of leadership. You're spreading the word in such a way that's really helpful for others. And if you're doing those things where you're nailing the basics, you're getting kind of good at it and hope to get really good at it, and then telling other people about it and serving it as an example in terms of how it can be used and applied, I think you can build a tremendous amount of literacy and capability as a result.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, because one of the things I've seen is, as I'm talking to a lot of people at different levels, that now every day you have like 10 new tools pop up. And
Yeah.
tools you kind of get used to it, and then Google launches things in their IO, and 50
Yeah,
of these
right.
companies are going to disappear, right? Like I was
Yeah.
watching the Microsoft and Google, saying, I'm like, oh my God, like these guys literally just killed a bunch of companies, like
Oh
already,
yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
Like, and that's just my personal take too. Like a lot of these Gen AI companies, unless you are like a big, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude Play, the other Gen AI companies, doesn't matter you're doing, images, text, video,
Yep.
whatever it is,
Yep.
you are going to get swallowed up by these big guys. You can compete. You just can't compete, because it's expensive to use the tool, because by the end of the day, those companies, unless they have their own model, which is still expensive, a lot of them are just wrappers over ChatGPT, other ones. So when you are run something, you can have your current customers to do certain things, but eventually the prices change. People are like, hey, I understand now. I can just literally go to Google and use exact same interface you are providing me, because you are just giving me a use case. I can do over that. So that's one thing that we're kind of seeing, and we probably will see another 18 months or so. A lot of this stuff is going to wither out on its own. So one of the things I also was, so when you are starting as an individual, let's say I'm a city manager, whatnot, a lot of these tools, you're like, well, somebody told me this tool, I look into it. These might not be the big guys, but might not be other smaller companies who are building these AI tools. You spend time learning those, and then, or otherwise you're a little scared, is like, yeah, let me learn this, but then is this going to get replaced by somebody else, or is this company going to stop existing in like 18 months and I've spent all this time learning it? So how do you think a mindset should be around that, to put their concerns at ease, or what is the best practice they should think about when they're
Yeah, it's a good one. So first, the way that I think a majority of AI is truly going to get brought into organizations, an individual level and organizational level, is through existing technology. So that means that like it's coming in through Microsoft, it's coming in through Google, it's coming in through our Anthropic and OpenAI, the guys that are going to be here forever. I think those are like, if I was putting this into like a criteria, those are like the safe tools to go work with, because those guys aren't going out.
Right.
Like they're going to be around. They have deep pockets. They provide incredible value, and those are probably going to be people that are buying the smaller companies anyway. So there's that. I think if you find something that you really like, so let me give you an example. So Canva's been out for a while. It's a solid design tool. Lots of ways to even replace your agency in some ways, just simply by learning how to use Canva for large portions of what you're going to do. And then now we have Gamma, which has been out for a while now, which also does parts of what that does and other things also. And I think those are interesting tools to play with and apply. And I would look at the term that I would come up with is, or what I would think about is like almost like adaptive resilience. Mm-hmm. Stuff's going to change, so you just got to stay grounded and understand that what the tools that you're using are likely going to change. Like that it will be a reality. And even like if you and I went in a time machine right now, and we went and did the first version of OpenAI ChatGPT, right, it looks like it was written by like a fourth grader. Yeah. It's hilarious where we are now. Like the stuff is just, and that was November 22. Yeah. So this isn't that long ago, right. So I think even the existing tools change. So what I would say is that one is, find something that you like that also is scalable. Like, as I said, I don't think Microsoft's going away. I don't think Google's going away. I don't think OpenAI is going away. I think those companies are going to be around for a really long time. And start with one and get really good with it. And then start the game of comparability. So I literally use 20 plus tools every single day. like day in, day out, every single day. And I also use all the big names that we just talked about because I think they do different things really well. And so for certain things, like if I'm doing something that's probably a little bit more narrative based, I really like Claude. I think it's a terrific tool for writing, and I got all kinds of training going on with it, so it understands all sorts of things about what I'm going to do and what I'm not going to do. ChatGPT is very good at some other things also, like it still writes well. You can train it to write well. You can set it up you can set up as a project. You can put all your information into it and have it write something that's shockingly just like you and I would write it. So all those things exist. But I would just say you got to start somewhere, so that city manager, kind of coming back to that example, it's a good example. That guy's saying, hey, listen, she's going to spend 15 minutes a day on working with something, an AI assistant. And let's just say she picks, let's say they're on a Google, they're on a Google Stack, so she's going to use Gemini for the next 6 months. And on a 15-minute, 5 times a week basis, she's going to get exceptionally good at it. And also continue to learn as it grows, because as you mentioned, new stuff comes out all the time, and there is no stopping this train.
Right.
The only thing that I would say is, just from a looking ahead sort of thing, I think a couple things that are going to exist. One of which is, and I think DeepSeek showed this very plainly, that people really didn't care what the LLM was.
Yeah.
They just wanted it to be cool, right, and work. So there's a lot of it. I think we're going to be using all the LLMs in the future. I don't think it's going to be one. I think we're going to use all of them. I think where it gets probably going to get really different is the difference between truly public data and private data. And there's a whole world out there that's going to exist for people that are working in their own private data, and that's going to have a lot of value versus the purely publicly accessible stuff that's across all the LLMs and platforms. But I'm not sure if that totally on board, but certainly along the lines of what we were talking about there.
Yeah, no, I think you touched on a bunch of different points. One is I've been using Canva for 10 plus years, and I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
My stuff is over there. So even if, and here's another thing too, so even if, let's say, a Canva's clone comes out today that does everything that Canva does, maybe even better.
Yes.
I have so much stuff in my Canva, I just don't want to move the stuff anymore. And
right.
That brings me back to, when Facebook and Google Plus, Google Plus was a better tool, but then people have all their friends, their messages, they're just the effort to put over here and then have my friends come over here is just too much of an effort. So Google Plus, even though it was a better tool, just ended up didn't going anywhere. And the second thing I also wanted, you literally touched on those things is, and I think I just want to add a little bit to that is 100% with you should use these tools so you can kind of understand which tool does what better. And also, I think makes more sense to hey, use this tool, but also keep in mind that you're not just learning how to use the tool, you're learning how to think and how to do all this stuff. And the tool it's kind of like something you can plug and place. So your thought process is the same, A leads to B leads to C, but you're using certain tool that leads to from A to B. But that tool can be plugged out and something else plugged in. But since your thought process is correct, the change of tool working from small company today to, let's say ChatGPT in the future or other versions, doesn't affect you that much, right?
Yeah, that's dead on. There is, the mindset thing I think is real, and just understand that's part of why you would go through this process of truly understanding sort of how it works. And once you understand truly how it works, it becomes very comfortable.
Right.
I know it's probably a strange word, but you just, okay, well, this is how I do a prompt, and this is what the prompt's going to give me. And I know if it doesn't give me this, I know I need to do A, B, and C. And you're not going to know that stuff in the very beginning, but just taking the time to truly understand, what that looks like, that there is, this whole game of, okay, if I give it a job, whatever the AI assistant is a job, give it a role, and you give it boundaries, and you say exactly what you want it to do. And you create all the other sort of elements of and you give enough texture to it where it allows it to do really well. And you give it a chance to take a break. That's one of our newer things that we've just started doing. But hey, don't just answer quick. Take a little bit of time to think about this. Wonderful things are almost humanizing it even further. But you can get remarkably good results out of that. And, when we were first playing this game, we're doing these short word, prompts, and I do these super things now that are hundreds and hundreds of words now because they're full on descriptions, and they I cover all sorts of things of what I want to do and what I don't want to do, and I don't want to waste this time. And hey, take a little break here and make sure you add this, and this is and the more specific you are, And this is all a process, right? Just as you're saying, this is ABC, like all these things, and there's all these acronyms. There's probably 15 good, like really good prompting, methodologies that people can follow, and just using those, that's going to exist across, that whole sort of, platform. And I think the other thing too, which is, interesting, is that the changes will likely make it easier, not harder. Like we've already gone through a lot of the heavy lifting. I mean, like this wasn't that long ago when guys like us were looking at Python. Like, hey, I'm gonna learn. I'm gonna go work and I'm gonna go build that in Python or something. I mean, now you're not doing that.
Yeah.
Or you're going to one of the AI assistants and ask him to help you code it if you're still working in Python, and they actually build the code block you need or whatever else it is. So it's just funny how it changes. But I do think it's going to get easier. I do think it's going to get more native. I do think it's going to get even more almost acceptable in our minds of how we think and what we do. It's like if right now, if like just think about like what you do with or what you used to do with Google, you're probably doing with Perplexity now.
Right.
Probably still using Google too, but whatever. But like 15 years ago, someone said, "Hey, I'm going to go do a search on this." You would have been like, "You mean like through a telephone book or something? What do you mean?" So like now it's so prone. It's a noun. I'm going to go Google this sort of idea. It's just saying I'm going to use Perplexity to get me a source list of what I'm looking for, whatever it actually is. So I do think it's just going to continue to get easier and easier. And when you think about this from like the public sector perspective, I think they're in a really unique position because one is they got to do it right. Like there's elements that you can get away with and like the commercial space you can't do in public sector, for all sorts of reasons. You don't want it like, no one wants to end up in a newspaper for the wrong reasons, but the element of responsible AI is very closely tied to everything you would see within, city government, state government, all that other stuff. They're going to like use all the elements of, like they're going to openly talk about things like what is their bias, is there fairness, is there transparency? These are things that are very normal and natural within governmental space because it's how, it's even how the dollars are allocated to the agency, that they have to be, and they're audited, so like that stuff is very smart. And I think a lot of the AI, so I see a lot of really exciting growth within the public sector space and seeing also the types of conversations have continued to evolve dramatically over the last year. The things that I'm seeing now is really a lot of interest in, hey, how can we try this? And what can we actually do here? And like, even like someone like Microsoft with Copilot, obviously they have a GCC license, which is specific to government, has a few less features than the fully commercial version. It sounds like they're all going to be available eventually. They're just working through all the data requirements. It basically means it's just going to be a better, more data secure tool to use. I owe $5 into that swear jar. I just use the word tool again. But that is something that's really fascinating to watch and see, and also just understand, that space is understanding it too, and is also being, careful about adoption, which is probably a very smart idea.
I want to touch on one thing that you talked about in the beginning about data. So when you are starting out, how do you know your data is let's say if I'm not a data person, I am a city clerk, I have this documents, whatnot. What is a simple thing for me to kind of even think through, okay, like, is this my data good enough? Or
Yeah.
right data for me?
Yeah.
What is a simple, 1 or 2 checklist before you kind of get the IT involved? Because then it's like a very different type of thing.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a good one. So first and foremost, AI eats data. That's what it does. Any data. So just like us, it should be on healthy food. Should you give a healthy diet, you just give it clean data. So the elements of, like that. Yeah, data quality.
It has to be healthy food. I like that.
Data quality is kind of where it starts. So like even you as a city manager knows, hey, this isn't clean data, or this is kind of like the garbage in, garbage out exists. So, understanding, can I create to test, because I always want to start to test something. Can I get something that's accurate, complete, consistent, lined up? The easiest way to also think about that is like, can I just create a standardized format for it? There's the same headers, there's the same sort of names, all the elements behind it, that it's labeled appropriately, that so like, you can actually put it into an AI tool, and getting that and cleaning it early and keeping it that way is a very important thing that, it can do. And again, don't truly need like all IT assistants to do that. You're looking at it, even if you're looking at a spreadsheet and saying, oh, this information is all consistent, where it's all names on this column and it's all the rest is this column, or it's all this whatever it actually is. That is really honestly the first step. And just going through that bit, I think you can really, really, really go a long way to, preparing yourself to use AI appropriately. So the better the data, the better it is. I mean, that's sort of, that's almost cheating in a way to say it that way, but that's really what it is. And I do think there's, a couple other things that I think sometimes get misconstrued. And that is that more data does not mean more insight. In fact, it's usually the opposite. The goal is clarity, not volume.
Right.
So, and ultimately what the data should be able to do for you is that it doesn't drive the strategy, insight does. So whatever that data is that the, city manager, will use our city manager example again, has access to, is it of quality? Is there a way for us to sort of tie whatever that integrity is to an actual goal or outcome they're trying to create, and then look at what the infrastructure is around it? And, just they'll know enough to ask the questions, and without having to be put into a spot where they're suddenly on the IT team. But like that is even those sort of rather basic setups, and this is too like. Even if someone was to start with using some of the tools we talked about earlier and saying questions like the city manager, like going using one of the tools, say, so how do I create, what does a clean data cycle look like? Start asking the questions, use the tool to sort of say, okay, and that's not something that takes an extensive amount of time or needs an IT professional to do that. So it's a little bit of research perhaps. And then also, if they are going to outsource parts of it, just outsource that to some folks that know what they're doing. Like, my organization works a lot, and data is one of the core cornerstones for our practice and what we do, and also how it ties to artificial intelligence. And there's lots of people out there that do it. It's not as commercial for us, it's only, but just there's lots of places to ask. And even if you were to get into one of the communities, so you and I are both active on LinkedIn, for example, start finding some folks that are out there and start asking a couple questions. Be surprised what people will tell you. They'll tell you everything. Like I have conversations every single day with people that I didn't know the day before. I read one of my posts, or they read something else, or saw me speak somewhere, or whatever else it is, and that leads into a, hey, what do you think about this? And I'll have those conversations all day long, and I know lots of other people do because other people have them with me. So that's really the way I would look at that for sure.